Hi everyone. Before we move to the practicals of home composting, I would like to give a little bit of my thoughts and a little bit of a comparison of what was the experience of visiting the industrial composting facilities. And I don't mean any criticism. I don't. I think they are doing a great work, but it would be good to make a wrap up on these experiences before we move to the home composting. All right, so the two experiences that we visited were the Kala compost from higher waters, which was composting sludge material, and the other one was the Al Haradi compost factory, which is part of the One Royal Court. So the two composting facilities, they're a huge size, very big size, and they're very, very different from each other. The principles behind each one of those are very similar, but the materials and the operation is very different. So I thought before we move on to home composting, I would give some comments about those two experiences and to give a good transition between topics. Yeah. So to start with, we have that the sewage material, it's a lot more challenging to work than manures. Yeah? To work with sewage, you're working with uh, waste from human origin. There is a lot of cultural blockage and rejection to this type of materials and this type of recycling. And there's a lot more challenges involved in the technical side about this. So in the higher waters, you would see they are very sensitive about the possibility of generating any negative image with regards to this, even though they're doing a great job. And in the composting facility from the Al Haradi, the One Royal Court, they are more concerned about what is related to the secrecy of the of what are the farms from the royal family and these kind of things. They don't want to make public, things that I'm not aware of. Yeah, but it's more like not. It's do not record and do not take images and this kind of things. Is this more the type of concern that they have? So the amount of waste, I will guess that Haya in Kala Compost is working with at least twice as much as the volume of compost than Al Haradi is working. And when you have huge amount of waste, you have always challenges regarding the flux of this material, the size of the patios of operation, and to keep those materials flowing through the patio. So if you have a lot of material coming in, you always have to make space to receive them, and therefore you have to keep this compost process highly efficient in a way that there is always going to be space to receive the new materials, and you're always moving material to the sites for maturing and leaving the active compost patio free for the new material to arrive. So anything that will delay these operations will be a hurdle for operating a huge compost facility like that. The other things that they have challenging is the type of materials they receive. The sewage from treatment plants is a type of material which is challenging in itself. This has a very poor airflow, but it has a very high carbon to nitrogen ratio, very low carbon to nitrogen ratio, I must say. And these things makes it that you must process this quickly to avoid creating anaerobic conditions on this material. So you want to mix it with other materials. We are creating structure, giving more macropores on the compost piles, and immediately processing this. Do not wait a lot until you make up the windrows with this material. So as soon as the sewage arrive, they go directly to the patio, and then you add up the layers of the shredded plant material on top of that. In the case of Al-Haradi, they can receive those manures, pile them up, because it's a well-structured material with a lot of hay, sawdust. It's already quite balanced material. There is a lot of high carbon materials inside it because of the bedding for horses and camels and things like that. So they can afford to pile these materials up and have it like sort of pre-composted before they make the windrows later on. So this process of being able to wait a little bit more, it's easier for Al-Haradi in this sense, but it is also, if you don't do it quick enough, what will happen is when you make the windrows, they will not heat up very quickly because they already been through some decomposition. It's quite of stabilizing already. So to catch up that thermophilic phase of the composting, you will need to do it as quick as possible. I guess Haya does not have that problem because everything goes to the patio immediately. Whereas in Al-Haradi, depending on how long does it stays on the wetting process or piled up before making the windrows, it will have more or less trouble in reaching the temperatures, the targeted temperatures for the thermophilic phase on the active composting process. The thermophilic phase, you want that thermophilic phase because the thermophilic phase will kill the seeds that comes within the material that's arriving, and also will sterilize in a sense that will decrease the probability that you will find any pathogens on that final product. If you go through the thermophilic phase for at least 2 or 3 weeks, that will decrease a lot the possibility that you will receive any pathogens on the final product. So in the case of regarding the type of material that they're dealing with, the sewage, you have some other concerns that you do not have in the Al-Haradi. For example, you have to always be monitoring for heavy metals because it's coming from urban waste, and in this, you never know what the population is throwing at their water, and some of these things will end up adding heavy metals to this material. But because they're monitoring that, they're making sure that these are very low level. In some low level, you will have almost everything. So it's not of concern if it's low level, but if it crosses those thresholds of regulation, then you must always be careful in monitoring and be able to reject some of the material if it crosses some of the safety lines, and then be able to assure this quality for the end user is a good thing. It's a good thing, and Haya is doing that really well. Yeah, so this is not a concern for Al-Haradi, the heavy metals, but actually, yes, it's for Haya. I think both composting sites, they have some amount of trouble with plastics present, and they also have some amount of trouble with rocks in the material. And the rocks are a problem because it damages the machinery. And the plastics, it's a problem that is really hard to deal with. And the only proper way of dealing with the plastics is to increase the source separation. Is try to work with whoever is bringing the material in to have some sort of separation before you receive it. Because after you receive it, the only way of doing it properly is to have a lot of labor go through this material and screen them through and separate the plastics. So this is a high labor process. You don't want to do it, but actually when it's needed, it must be done. So some similar problems and others not so similar to each other. Each one of these problems for you represents an opportunity. Both these companies are they're taking consultancy and from external firms. They are buying expensive equipment from foreigners, foreign companies from Switzerland, Holland, or wherever. But and they're, they hire this consultancy for making sure that they're doing things on a high standard, but still, of course, there are some local, uh, uh, let's say, idiosyncrasies for the materials they are receiving that makes it very specific. And then, of course, they are working through and tackling these small problems, but nothing that is compromising the operation or the quality of their material that they are producing. Uh, so let's talk about the operation that they are doing here, and both of them are doing active composting, thermophilic active composting with windrows and windrow turners, these big machines that go through turning the compost, and that turning has two functions. One is for reducing the temperature if it's too high, reducing the CO2 content to make it an aerobic composting, and in the case of Haya, to reduce the moisture content. So Haya is highly concerned on reducing the moisture content of the cakes they receive, the sludge, because it comes with 80% moisture, and they want to bring it to 20 to 30% for processing. And this needs to be done by just exposing this material to the heat and atmosphere outside, so it will evaporate and reduce that moisture content. That being said, the opposite is happening between Al Haradi and Kala composting, where Al Haradi is wetting their composite to keep the moisture up, and that favors the decomposition process, whereas Haya does not add any liquids to this composting process. So what will happen is, I suspect that maybe there is the maturity of the composting Al Haradi will be a higher maturity, a more stable end product than you will have in Kala compost, because of this. You have a longer period with the wet material, and the high moisture will allow the microbes to grow more biomass and process this material even more. So the size of the compost piles between the two sites, in Haya, the size is at least twice as big as the one in Al Haradi, and that it has to do with the type of machinery that they have purchased. If you have larger machinery, you can make bigger compost piles, whereas if you have smaller windrow turners, you will have to work with, obviously, smaller size of these piles, the compost piles. Yeah, so this does not compromise at all the quality, just that if you have a very big pile, you will have to be very careful to turn this very often, because then otherwise the buildup of CO2 will be too high, and then you will create some anaerobic conditions. You might end up with overheating the material, so if you don't turn this material very often. And therefore, you need to be very careful and be the cycles of turning the windrows will have to be more frequent if you have bigger piles. With regards to the maturing process and packaging and marketing, I think there's not much to be said. Both patios are doing maturing, just piling up the material and giving enough time for that the heat goes down, and you don't have a big difference between the heat inside the compost and the heat outside. And when that is achieved, then you assume that you have stable compost. The final material from Al Haradi has some amount of soil, whereas the one from Haya is more woody, black material because of the sewage woody material that they use. And so this is kind of the visual aspect of the compost at one site and the other is very different. And I would expect that the compost at Al Haradi has a more premium price with regards to Haya because of just the origin of the material and how fine it is. It feels very fine because it's already mixed with some silt from the dam. So this type of material feels very like ready to use. Whereas the one from Haya, I think it's richer in nutrient, but you will have to add in low amount. It's not like ready to pot. So the material from Al Haradi, I would expect to get a more premium price. Also because they are certified organic, and being certified organic already puts them in an advantage in this situation. But both materials are from, as I could see, from a high quality and expected to be highly efficient as organic fertilizers for either farms or for gardens. Yeah, for gardens. The commercial strategy is highly developed in Haya, and in the case of Al Haradi will be less developed because they are more focused in producing this compost to the farms, that from the one Royal Court, and whereas Haya has to get rid of all the material and sell it, and so I would say that Haya is highly invested in having salespeople and doing this commercial strategy in a very aggressive way, and having this material get out of their compost site as quick as possible. In terms of monitoring of the quality and maturity and analysis of the process, I would say Al Haradi is doing more and doing more analysis, more different analysis for quality assurance than Haya, but nevertheless, some of the things that are being done in Al Haradi they will always receive the same result. It's just like there is no point of doing this always. If you do it at some intervals, once a year or twice a year, it's enough to have them. So I guess in both situations, the monitoring is fine. Yeah, the monitoring is fine. What else can I say about this? I think with regards to the germination test, the Al Haradi composting will be more concerned about having seeds that are coming from the manure and surviving the composting process, while the germination test for Haya should be more related to, is this compost harmful for plants or not, and in at which concentration. So if they do those germination tests, I think they're different focus for both of them. I would never expect the Al Haradi one to be harmful for plants because they would never have the concentration too high as you could have in higher concentration of nutrients. So too much nitrogen could hurt plants, but only if you use it in high amounts. So you increase the fertilizer value if you have more nutrients, but then you have to use in lower amounts. So this type of recommendation, of course, they are working really well with the farmers, and there is some strategy from High also that to even give credit to the farmers, use the compost and then only pay them afterwards, after they harvest. Yeah, so I think that is enough for the comparison between both sides. I would just say that this comparison is not meant as any criticism, and in a way that they're doing things well. Both of them are doing things well. Just that there are structural difference and material differences that makes them very different. And I thought it was a good thing if I could highlight this for you guys before we move on to home composting processes. Okay, thank you.